He believed that money could buy security, that technology could replace presence, that surveillance was love disguised as care. Fernando was a millionaire used to controlling everything: businesses, people, risks, and even the silence inside his own home. After his daughter became paralyzed, he made an extreme decision. He installed hidden cameras throughout the mansion, not out of obsession, but out of fear of failing as a father once again. What he never imagined is that the cameras would not reveal cruelty, they would not show explicit neglect, they would reveal something far more disturbing. A housemaid sitting on the floor in silence, without touching, without speaking, doing something that no doctor, no amount of money, and no protocol had ever managed to do before. That night, Fernando realized he was protecting his daughter, but stealing something essential from her. And when he understood that, it was already too late to pretend he hadn't seen it. This is not a story about illness. It is a story about control, guilt, and the price of watching over someone who only needed to be loved. Stay until the end, because what this housemaid did will completely change the way you understand care, protection, and trust. Subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss stories like this, stories that seem simple, but shatter everything we thought we knew. Fernando Silva was not born surrounded by luxury, but he grew up surrounded by goals. From a young age, he learned that the world respects those who anticipate risks. Every decision was calculated, every step taken with a margin of safety. He believed that predictability was synonymous with protection. While others dreamed, Fernando planned. While others trusted, he double-checked. That mindset led him to build a solid financial empire. Companies, real estate, investments, everything under absolute control. To him, money was not about showing off, it was about shielding himself. And shielding, in his view, meant peace. With success came praise, headlines, and exclusive invitations. Fernando came to be seen as someone who never made mistakes. A man who turned chaos into order through numbers and contracts. But behind the public image there was a quiet belief. The idea that everything can be avoided if it is well planned. That accidents only happen to those who let their guard down. That tragedies choose unprepared victims. Fernando did not see himself as vulnerable. He saw himself as someone above the improbable. And that shaped every aspect of his life. When Ana was born, Fernando applied the same logic to fatherhood. The best doctors, the best schools, the best environments. Nothing was left to chance when it came to his daughter. He believed that love was also organization. That protecting meant anticipating every possible threat. Ana grew up in a clean, safe, and quiet world. Everything was designed to avoid falls, frustrations, and risks. Fernando watched everything with constant attention. Not out of fear, but out of conviction. The conviction that control was care. The mansion where they lived reflected that philosophy. Tall gates, modern systems, trained teams. Nothing came in without being logged, nothing left without being noticed. Fernando called that prevention. Others would call it excessive, but he ignored them. To him, excess only exists when something goes wrong. And as long as everything worked, he felt right. The house was not just a home, it was a system. An organism designed to protect Ana from the world. And that brought him comfort. Fernando slept peacefully, believing that. He woke up confident that he was doing everything right. He never asked himself if there was something beyond control. He never considered that life could ignore his calculations. He believed that money buys time, solutions, and safety. And up until that moment, everything seemed to confirm that theory. Ana smiled, the routine worked, order reigned. Nothing suggested that anything could break that structure. Nothing signaled that reality was about to contradict him. But absolute certainty is usually fragile. He often said that unexpected events are failures of planning. A phrase repeated in meetings and interviews. Fernando believed it with the same firmness as a dogma. His trajectory reinforced that logic every single day. The more control, the fewer surprises. The more money, the less pain. That was how he saw the world. And that was how he taught, even without words. Ana grew up watching a father who never hesitated. A father who seemed invincible. But that invincibility came at an invisible cost. Fernando rarely allowed himself to feel fear. Emotions to him were dangerous distractions. He preferred trusting systems over people. He preferred data over intuition. He believed that feelings protect no one. That stance distanced him from human fragility, and made him believe he was always one step ahead. Without realizing that some pain gives no warning, and does not respect planning. At that stage of his life, Fernando had not yet been confronted. Nothing had broken his internal logic. Nothing had forced him to admit limits. He felt prepared for anything. Convinced that he had purchased every possible guarantee, health insurance, private security, total control. Everything seemed covered, everything seemed resolved. Life moved forward predictably, almost too comfortably. And precisely because of that, silently dangerous. Because when everything seems under control, the fall is usually greater. Fernando did not know it, but he was about to learn that, not because of wrong choices but because of something beyond reach. Something that does not respond to money or planning. Something that ignores contracts and systems. Something that arrives without asking permission, and when it arrives, it redefines everything, including what it means to protect someone, including what it means to be a father, including what control truly means. And that lesson would begin in the cruelest way possible. The day began too ordinary to seem dangerous. Fernando would remember that later, with cruel precision. Anna left smiling, talking about something simple, something light. Nothing indicated a rupture, nothing announced tragedy. The routine followed its usual, time script. An experienced driver, a safe car, a familiar route. Fernando believed the risks had already been neutralized, that it was just another day under control. And that was exactly when everything failed, without warning, without logic, without permission. The impact did not come like a movie scene. It came as silence broken by confused screams. A phone ringing at the wrong time, a trembling voice on the other end. Fernando heard scattered words before grasping their meaning. Accident. Hospital. Urgent. His world shrank in that instant. Everything that had seemed solid lost its shape. He ran without thinking, something rare for him. For the first time, there was no plan, only raw fear. At the hospital, time lost its order. Minutes felt like hours, hours felt non-existent. Doctor spoke, but Fernando barely listened. His mind searched for numbers, probabilities, guarantees. Nothing made sense in that place. The smell, the sounds, the waiting. It was a place where money did not speed up decisions. Where influence did not bring faster diagnoses. Fernando realized this too late. There, he was just a father. When the diagnosis came, it came bluntly, without detours, without any possible softening. The word, paralysis, fell like a physical weight. Fernando felt his body collapse from the inside. He tried to question, argue, negotiate. He looked for immediate alternatives, urgent solutions. But there were no hidden clauses, there were no shortcuts available. Science had done what it could. And what it could do was not enough. Anna woke up confused, frightened, unable to move. Her eyes searched for answers in her father's face. Fernando tried to smile, tried to be strong. But something inside him had already broken. He held his daughter's hand too tightly. As if he could anchor her there. As if touch alone could reverse fate. Anna asked if she would walk again. Fernando did not answer right away, and that silence said everything. In that moment, control collapsed. Not gradually, but all at once. Fernando understood that he had not foreseen everything. That some tragedies do not ask permission. That planning does not prevent chance. The feeling of invincibility evaporated. It gave way to a fear he had never trained for. A fear without calculation, without margin. The fear of failing as a father. The fear of being unable to protect the one he loved most. The days that followed were automatic. Tests, consultations, medical decisions. Fernando did everything mechanically. But inside he fought against guilt. He replayed every detail, searching for a mistake. A point where he could have prevented it. His mind insisted on finding someone to blame. Because accepting chance felt unbearable. Accepting limits felt like humiliation. And Fernando had never dealt well with limits. Anna began to notice the changes. The wheelchair, the looks, the excessive care. Her world shrank quickly. Fernando tried to make up for it with presence. But presence does not replace answers. He did not know what to say. He did not know how to explain something he did not understand himself. For the first time, money offered no comfort. The mansion felt too distant. The future, frighteningly undefined. Fernando began to avoid the mirror. He saw there someone who had failed his own system. Everything he believed in was put into question. If he could not prevent this, what else did he not control? That question echoed endlessly. He made himself one promise. Never again allow Anna to be vulnerable. Never again trust blindly. If the world was unpredictable, he would be vigilant. And that promise would change everything. The accident did not take only Anna's movement. It took the illusion that control is enough. It took Fernando's automatic peace. And it planted something new inside that house. A heavy silence, full of fear and excessive protection. Fernando did not yet know how to act. But he knew he had to do something. Something that would ensure this would never happen again. Even if it cost him his own peace of mind. And that impulse would open the next chapter of this story. The return home brought no relief. It brought estrangement. The mansion felt larger, colder, more distant. Every corridor echoed with a silence that had not existed before. Fernando ordered everything to be adapted quickly: ramps, rails, medical equipment. The house stopped being a home and became a structure. Functional, efficient, impersonal. Everything was correct on paper. But something essential was gone. Professionals began to circulate daily. Nurses, physical therapists, caregivers. All well-trained, all punctual. They spoke in technical terms and neutral voices. They treated Anna with mechanical care. Not rude, but without warmth. Fernando watched everything from a distance. That he analyzed gestures, timing, protocols. That he felt relieved to see order. Even without feeling comfort. Anna began to live by schedules. Time to wake up, time to eat, time to exercise. Every activity came with instructions. Little room for spontaneity. Little room for mistakes. Fernando believed discipline would help. That routine would bring emotional stability. But Anna grew quieter every day. Her smile appeared less often, and no one seemed to notice. The professionals came and went, frequent turnover, new faces. No one stayed long enough to build a bond. For them it was just another job. For Anna, they were strangers touching her body, strangers deciding her movements. Fernando saw this as necessary. That he convinced himself that excessive closeness interferes. That emotion compromises care. That was what he told himself. The mansion gained new sounds, equipment beeps, hurried footsteps. Doors opening and closing without warning. Fernando began to avoid certain areas of the house. That he did not like seeing his daughter like that. That he preferred reports to scenes. That he preferred results to long conversations. That he thought distance protected him. But distance only increased the emptiness. And the emptiness spread. Anna watched everything in silence. She learned quickly that she needed to obey, that her emotions were not on the schedule, that crying delayed procedures, that complaining brought impatient looks. So she stopped complaining, kept her questions to herself, accepted the role of the exemplary patient, and that was more concerning than any scream, even if no one noticed. Fernando believed he was doing the best thing. That he repeated it like a mantra. Everything was being done correctly, the best professionals were there, the best possible treatment was underway. Still, something felt wrong. The house no longer had laughter. There was no music, no casual conversation. Only efficiency, and efficiency does not warm anyone. At night, Fernando walked through the mansion. That he listened to the distant sound of the equipment. That he wondered whether that was protection or prison. But he quickly pushed the doubt away. Doubts weaken decisions, and he could not afford to falter. That he believed that, with time, everything would adjust, that Anna would adapt, that the pain would lessen, that the silence was temporary. The problem is that long silences create cracks, and cracks let dangerous things seep through. Fernando did not know that yet, but he was beginning to feel a discomfort hard to name. Something small, almost invisible. A sense that something was slipping away, not in the tests nor in the reports, but in the human details, details that do not appear on spreadsheets, and that would soon begin to reveal themselves. The mansion functioned perfectly, but Anna seemed increasingly distant. Fernando realized this too late. And when he tried to get closer, he felt resistance. As if his daughter were behind an invisible wall. A wall built without intention. Made of protocols, schedules, and neutral voices. Fernando still believed control would solve it. But small signs were beginning to appear. Signs he would not be able to ignore for long. At first, Fernando thought it was just exhaustion. Long shifts, many professionals, a heavy routine. Nothing out of the ordinary, at least according to him. But small details began to bother him. Simple things, almost invisible. A glass left too far away. A discrete delay in the physical therapy schedule. An impatient tone disguised as professionalism. Fernando noticed, but did not comment. He preferred to observe. One day, Anna complained of pain. She did not scream, she did not cry. She spoke softly, almost apologetically. The caregiver replied that it was normal, that it was part of the process. Fernando was in the hallway and heard it. Something about that response unsettled him. It was not rudeness. It was indifference. And indifference hurts more than a mistake. Another episode followed soon after. A physical therapist rushed a movement. Anna held her breath in pain. The exercise continued anyway. "We need to push," they said. Fernando watched from a distance. He knew persistence was part of it. But he also knew when it crossed a line. He noted it mentally. Another point outside the norm. The professionals were not bad people. That was the problem. They were too correct. They treated Anna like a procedure, like a body to be adjusted, not like a frightened child. Fernando began to realize that the touch was technical, not gentle. The speech was functional, not comforting, and that started to weigh on him. Anna began to grow tense before the sessions. Shallow breathing, clenched hands. Fernando noticed and asked. She replied that everything was fine. But she looked away. That gesture stayed with him. Fernando recognized it. It was the same one he used in difficult meetings. When something bothered him, but he wanted to avoid confrontation. His daughter was learning to stay silent. One night, Fernando found Anna wet. It was not from a bath. It was neglect. The caregiver had been late. She apologized quickly, explained the delay. Fernando accepted it, but something broke. It was not the mistake. It was how natural it seemed. As if it were acceptable. And to him it was not. These episodes began to accumulate, small but constant. None serious enough for a complaint, but enough to create distrust. Fernando started reviewing schedules, asking detailed questions, demanding more thorough reports. The professionals noticed the change. The atmosphere grew tense, and that affected Anna. The mansion was no longer just silent. It was suspicious. Fernando felt the weight of being constantly alert. That he slept less. That he watched more. The fear was not of direct aggression. It was of silent negligence. The kind that goes unnoticed, the kind that hurts without leaving marks, and that tormented him. Fernando began to question his choice of people. How to trust those who see this as just a job? How to ensure Anna was truly safe? Those questions gave him no peace. That he realized the system had flaws. And flaws do not mix with vulnerability. With every small slip, trust diminished. And when trust ends, excessive control is born. Fernando did not admit it yet, but he was already determined to act. He promised himself he would find a solution. Something that did not depend on others' goodwill. Something that would restore his sense of security. Not to punish, but to prevent. To ensure Anna would never be ignored again. Even if it meant crossing ethical lines. Even if no one ever knew. Even if it became a heavy secret. Fernando did not yet know how he would do it, but the decision had already been made. The idea did not come suddenly. It formed in silence, like an invisible crack. Fernando spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling. He replayed small scenes, neutral phrases, hurried gestures. Nothing serious enough to act on openly, but serious enough to ignore. He recognized that discomfort. It was the same feeling he had before major business decisions, when something was not under control. And control had always been his language. Fernando began by justifying it to himself. He said it was not distrust, it was prevention. That it was not spying but care. After all, the house already had security systems. Cameras on the walls, sensors on the gates. Why should the interior be any different? Anna was vulnerable, immobile, dependent on others, and that, to him, was unacceptable. He researched discreetly. Small models, almost invisible. No lights, no sounds, no traces, advanced technology, secure storage. Nothing that would draw attention. Nothing that would reveal their presence. Fernando wanted to observe without interfering. He wanted to see what happened when no one felt watched. Only then, he believed, would the truth appear, and truth had always justified hard decisions. The installation was done in a single day. No fuss, no staff around. Fernando oversaw everything closely. He chose strategic points. Hallways, the care room, Anna's bedroom. Not in bathrooms, he told himself. There were limits he swore he would respect. Even so, something bothered him. A strange weight in his chest, which he quickly ignored. When everything was finished, Fernando felt relief. As if he had caught his breath again. Now he could know. Now he would not depend on reports. Now he would have proof if something was wrong. He told no one. Not the professionals. Not even Anna herself. He told himself it was temporary. Just until he felt safe again. In the first few days he resisted watching. Access was there, just a tap away. But Fernando avoided it. Watching would mean reliving it. It would mean facing his daughter's vulnerability. He preferred to believe that nothing was happening. That the cameras would never be needed. They were there as emotional insurance. Not as a habit. At least, that was what he told himself. The presence of the cameras changed Fernando. Even without watching, he knew he could. He felt less anxiety during the day. He slept a little better. He believed he had done the right thing. But something inside him remained restless. As if he had crossed an invisible boundary. A boundary between protecting and controlling too much. Fernando did not want to think about it. Thinking would make room for guilt. He began to look at people differently. Every smile seemed rehearsed. Every gesture, potentially false. Fernando wondered who people were when no one was watching. And now, someone was watching. Even if they did not know it, that feeling gave him power, and also a discomfort he found hard to admit. Because power without transparency demands a price. And Fernando did not yet know what his would be. The cameras became a heavy secret. Something he carried alone. Not out of shame, but conviction. He believed he was doing what was necessary. That any father would do the same. That judgment only comes from those who have never been in that position. Fernando convinced himself of that. But deep down, there was an unanswered question. What if he saw something he was not prepared to see? That doubt would remain silent, for now. Having access to the footage did not mean being ready to watch it. Fernando learned that quickly. The app on his phone became a silent wait. Always there, always accessible. But rarely opened that he would slide his finger across the screen and pull back. Like someone avoiding touching something hot. Watching meant facing raw reality, and reality had already been harsh enough. Fernando preferred to postpone it. During the day he kept himself busy, meetings, calls, strategic decisions. Everything to keep his mind away. But at night the silence returned, and with it doubt. What might be happening now? Was Anna comfortable? Had someone been impatient? Those questions hovered, and he did not want visual answers. Fernando created internal excuses that he told himself that if something serious happened, he would feel it. That a father always knows that it was a way to protect himself. To keep the cameras from becoming an obsession. But the effort was costly. His sleep became light, his body tense. Any noise woke him. As if he were always on alert. He avoided passing by the monitoring room. That door became a symbolic boundary. Opening it meant crossing a line between before and after. Fernando still wanted to believe that nothing had changed that much. That Anna was fine. That the professionals were doing their job properly. The cameras were there only as a guarantee. A plan B he would not need to use. But plan Bs exist for a reason. Guilt began to seep in. Guilt for not watching. Guilt for having installed them. Guilt for not knowing which was worse. Fernando felt he was failing in some way. As if protecting required constant presence. But too much presence hurt. He wondered if he was running away. Running from pain. Running from helplessness. Anna noticed the change in her father. That he was more distant. More serious. Less emotionally available. When she called him he responded quickly. But with tired eyes. Fernando did not notice that he was too busy trying to be strong, without understanding that strength without sensitivity creates distance. And that created a new emptiness. The recordings accumulated, days, weeks, all stored, all unseen. Fernando told himself it was better that way. That watching would not change the past, that it would not restore Anna's movement. But his true fear was something else. The fear of confirming that something was wrong, the fear of not being able to act in time. His body began to demand payment, frequent headaches, tension in his shoulders, shortness of breath. Fernando was no longer the same. The control he sought became a burden, protection turned into silent surveillance, and surveillance turned into anxiety that he was too exhausted to notice. But the limit was approaching. One night, Fernando woke up drenched in sweat. He had dreamed of Anna calling his name. He woke with his heart racing. He grabbed his phone without thinking. Opened the app, stared at the home screen. Did not open any camera, closed it again. But something had changed. The resistance was beginning to give way. He knew he could not avoid it forever. That sooner or later he would have to look. The question was no longer if he would watch, but when, and what he would do afterward. Fernando was not ready yet, but curiosity was starting to overcome fear. And when that happens, something always surfaces. Something that changes the course of the story, and that moment was approaching. The departure of the former housekeeper happened without any fuss. A quick request, almost bureaucratic. No arguments, no long explanations. Fernando accepted it the way he accepts numbers that do not add up. He recorded it, handled it, moved on. At that moment he did not want additional conflicts. The house already carried enough weight. One more change seemed merely administrative. But silent changes often hide something. Even when no one notices. Fernando requested an immediate replacement. He did not like empty spaces in the routine. To him, absence creates flaws. The agency sent a few names. Organized resumes, standard references. Nothing that stood out, until one profile differed because of its simplicity. Little formal experience. Few words. A common name, Carolina. Her arrival was almost imperceptible. No long introductions. No rehearsed speeches. Carolina entered the mansion like someone who understands boundaries, observing more than speaking. Light steps, attentive gaze. She greeted with restrained respect. Fernando noticed that immediately. She did not try too hard to please, and that, curiously, caught his attention. During the interview, Carolina answered only what was necessary. No exaggerations, no emotional stories. She spoke softly but clearly. She did not seem nervous. Nor did she seem overly confident. When asked about difficult experiences, she was honest. She said she took care of things as if they were her own. She did not promise miracles. She did not promise attachment. Only responsibility. Fernando approved her almost instinctively. Something about her posture calmed him. Perhaps because she did not seem strategic. Perhaps because she did not seem overly trained. He could not explain it. The decision was quick. Carolina started the next day without ceremony, without high expectations, and without knowing what she would truly find. Anna watched Carolina from a distance on the first day. She said nothing, she simply followed her with her eyes. Carolina noticed but did not force interaction. She went about her work naturally, organized, cleaned, respected the space. She did not try to start conversations, she did not ask invasive questions. Anna kept watching, and that initial silence created something curious. Fernando, for his part, remained cautious that he observed small gestures, the way Carolina moved through the house, how she reacted to the professionals. She did not interfere, she did not offer opinions when not asked, she seemed to understand her place. That pleased Fernando. But it also kept him alert that he still did not trust anyone. The first days passed without incident. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing worth noting, and precisely that seemed strange. Fernando was used to small mistakes. To disguised impatience. But Carolina showed none of that, neither for better nor for worse. That it was as if she were there without leaving traces, almost invisible. That invisibility would not last. But at that moment no one knew. The house remained silent, Fernando remained on alert. Anna continued observing, and Carolina continued working. Point 3 Worlds coexisting without touching, for now. Because small gestures are enough to change entire dynamics. And the next step would come from where no one expected. Fernando would remember that interview later with a detail that seemed too small to matter. The conversation had been objective, almost cold. That he asked practical, direct questions without detours, schedules, tasks, limits, routines. Carolina answered everything with simple precision. No long stories, no emotional justifications. She did not try to appear indispensable. Just available. Fernando liked that. Efficiency had always been his language. When Fernando asked if she had experience with children, Carolina hesitated for a second. It was not insecurity. It was reflection. She said she had cared for different children. Some healthy, others not. She did not go into details, she did not use technical terms, she spoke like someone who respects other people's stories. Fernando noted it mentally. He liked people who did not show off. That felt honest to him. The interview was nearing its end when Carolina looked around. Not in a curious way but attentively. Like someone who senses an environment before leaving, she noticed Anna in the background in silence. Her eyes attentive, watching everything. Carolina did not stare directly, she did not invade the space. But she did something unexpected. She asked in a low voice if Anna liked music. The question fell outside the script. Fernando found it strange that it was not a common question in that context. Music was not part of the protocols. It was not in the medical reports. It was not a priority. He replied that Anna used to like it before the accident. He said it neutrally. Like someone speaking about something distant. Carolina nodded. She did not comment further. Anna, however, heard it, and something inside her moved. It was almost imperceptible. A slight shift in her gaze. A different kind of attention. She did not speak. But that simple question opened a small crack. No one had asked that in a long time. Questions were usually about pain, exercises, schedules, not about preferences, not about who she was. Fernando ended the interview shortly after. The question kept echoing. Why music? He did not ask that. He did not want to show curiosity. But something about that choice unsettled him in a different way. It did not seem like an attempt to please. It felt spontaneous. And spontaneity did not belong in that house. Fernando stored the feeling away. Like filing something without knowing why. But without being able to forget it. Carolina thanked him and said goodbye respectfully. She did not ask for immediate confirmation. She did not show anxiety. She left the way she had entered, discreet. Anna followed her departure with her eyes. There was no smile. But there was attention. And attention had become rare there. Fernando did not notice at that moment. But something had subtly changed. When Carolina started the next day, the question was not mentioned again. She did not try to bring it back up. She did not bring music. She did not comment on it as if it had been mere curiosity. But Anna seemed different, more alert, more present. Fernando attributed it to chance. But chance rarely repeats itself without a reason, and that simple question was beginning to reverberate silently. Fernando continued his routine, trying not to think about it. But at night, the memory returned, music. Something so human. So absent from reports that he wondered when the last time was that Anna listened to something for pleasure. Not for therapy, not by medical recommendation. The question bothered him more than it should have. And that discomfort was preparing the ground for what was to come. Because small questions often open doors far too big to be ignored. The first week passed without any notable events. Nothing that justified alarm or suspicion. Carolina kept her schedule with silent precision. She arrived, worked, and left. No delays, no excesses. Fernando watched from a distance as always. Nothing strayed from the expected pattern. and that paradoxically made him more alert that he had already learned that problems do not always make noise. Sometimes, they hide in normality. Carolina did not try to get close to Anna right away. She limited herself to what was necessary. She arranged the room, organized objects, kept everything clean. She spoke little, only what was essential. She never raised her voice. She never showed haste. Anna watched everything in silence. Fernando noticed that constant gaze, but he did not interfere, that he preferred to let things flow. The professionals continued with their routines. They came and went with the same efficiency as always. Carolina did not interfere. She did not ask technical questions. She did not offer opinions. She seemed invisible during the appointments. That pleased some and unsettled others. Fernando saw this as respect for boundaries, but he also felt curious. She seemed to notice things she did not comment on. Anna maintained her restrained behavior. No complaints, no outbursts, but something about her seemed more awake. Not better, not worse. Just different. She followed Carolina's movements with her eyes. Like someone following a story without words, Fernando noticed, but attributed it to novelty. A new person always draws attention at first. That he decided not to overestimate it. The nights remained silent. No unusual occurrences. Fernando slept a little better. The cameras remained off. He convinced himself that perhaps he was overreacting. Perhaps Carolina was just another competent employee. Perhaps nothing was wrong after all. That possibility brought relief. But it also created a false sense of security, and false sensations often precede real changes. Carolina seemed to understand the rhythms of the house. She did not break the silence. She did not forcefully fill spaces. She respected pauses. She respected Anna's time. Fernando noticed this without realizing. He noticed that it was a different kind of presence. Not invasive, not controlling, and it contrasted with everything around it. Anna began to ask small questions. Not to Carolina but to herself. Questions that lingered in her gaze, as if she were relearning how to observe the world. Fernando did not grasp this immediately. He was still focused on avoiding risks. On keeping everything under control. The calm week reinforced that stance. Perhaps the cameras would never be necessary. Perhaps he had acted too hastily. But the calm of that week felt strange. It was not peace. It was anticipation. As if something were being prepared in silence. Nothing happened, but something was about to happen. Fernando felt it as a mild discomfort. Anna felt it as growing curiosity, and Carolina continued working as usual, unaware that small gestures would soon begin to stand out, because when nothing draws attention, any detail can change everything. The change was not announced. It happened slowly, almost invisibly. Anna began staying awake longer during the day. She watched the movement of the house with more interest. Her eyes followed paths she had once ignored. It was not explicit joy. It was attention. A new, silent, curious attention. Fernando noticed it without being able to explain why. Something in his daughter's posture seemed different. Before, Anna remained withdrawn. A distant gaze, short answers. Now there were longer pauses. Moments when she seemed to hear something no one was saying. When Carolina entered the room, Anna slightly lifted her gaze. She did not ask for anything. She did not smile. She simply followed. Fernando noticed this on an ordinary morning, and found it strange that he noticed such a detail. Carolina did nothing special. She remained discreet, respectful. She did not start unnecessary conversations. She did not try to entertain Anna. But her presence seemed to fill the space in a different way, without haste, without pressure. Anna did not tense up when she approached. That alone was new. Fernando mentally filed that observation away. During meals, Anna began to take longer. Not because of physical difficulty, but because she seemed to want to be there. Her gaze did not immediately drift away. She watched Carolina set the table. Noticing small gestures, the way she folded the cloth, how she moved without making noise, Fernando felt something tighten in his chest that he did not know if it was hope or unease. Anna began to ask simple questions. Small things about the day, about objects, about sounds. Nothing deep. But questions indicate presence. And presence had been rare since the accident. Fernando answered as best he could. But he noticed the questions arose when Carolina was nearby. As if that environment allowed curiosity. As if it were safe to ask again. The professionals did not notice the change. They remained focused on protocols. Reports stayed the same. Nothing indicated clinical progress. But Fernando saw something that was not on paper. His daughter seemed more alive inside, still confined to the chair, still physically limited, but less absent, and that confused him. Anna began to anticipate certain moments of the day. She did not say it out loud, but Fernando noticed. She became more alert when Carolina approached, calmer when she was nearby. There was no special touch. There were no long conversations. There was simply coexistence. And that coexistence produced something unexpected. something Fernando did not know how to measure. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just adaptation, maybe it was a phase, but deep down he knew it was more than that. Something in that relationship was happening beyond his control, and that made him uneasy. Fernando liked to understand causes and effects. Here there was no clear equation. Only signs, and signs usually precede bigger changes. Anna began to smile at specific moments. Short smiles, almost shy. Fernando could hardly believe it when he saw the first one. It was not full joy that it was recognition. As if something made her feel seen. Fernando felt a knot in his throat. Not from sadness, but from a new kind of fear. The fear of not understanding what truly protects a child. He began to observe Carolina more closely, not out of suspicion, but out of genuine curiosity. What was she doing differently? Nothing that could be written down. Nothing that could be easily replicated, and that bothered him. Because control depends on repetition, and this felt too human to be controlled. Fernando did not know it yet, but he was about to seek answers where he had always avoided looking. The habit began without announcement, like almost everything about Carolina. A low sound, almost a breath. It was not a familiar song. Nor did it have clear lyrics. It was more a rhythm than a melody. Something that emerged while she organized the room, while she folded clothes, while she cleaned surfaces. Fernando heard it for the first time without paying attention. He thought it might be his imagination. But Anna heard it, and she heard it differently. The sound seemed to reach a place no one else touched. She remained still but attentive. Her eyes stopped wandering. They fixed on some undefined point. As if trying to follow the invisible rhythm. Anna said nothing, but her body responded. Her breathing became calmer, and that did not go unnoticed. Carolina was not singing to Anna, she was singing to herself, with no intention of provoking a reaction, with no expectation of a response. It was natural, almost unconscious. When she realized she was humming, she lowered the volume. As if respecting the silence of the house. But the sound had already been heard, and Anna seemed to wait for it. Fernando began to notice this with unease. In the following days the humming repeated itself, always soft, always simple, never at the exact same time. Anna began to anticipate those moments. She became more alert when Carolina approached. She did not speak, but her gaze transformed. There was curiosity there, and something close to comfort. Fernando watched from a distance, divided. He tried to ignore it at first. He told himself it was coincidence, that music does not change realities, but Anna seemed less tense, less withdrawn. Her shoulders relaxed, her face softened. There was no miracle, but there was presence, and presence changes atmospheres. One afternoon Carolina stopped humming. She noticed Anna's attentive gaze. There was a brief silence. A silence charged with expectation. Anna blinked slowly. Carolina simply smiled faintly. She said nothing, and resumed her work in silence. Anna took a long time to look away. As if something had been interrupted too soon. Fernando felt a tightness in his chest as he watched the scene. He began to wonder when the last time was that Anna had listened to music for pleasure. Not in therapy, not as a program stimulus, but as something that simply happens. The thought bothered him more than it should have. Because there was no protocol for that. There was no control. It was something that escaped the rules, and yet it seemed to help. Fernando did not know how to react to it, nor whether he should interfere. Anna tried to imitate the rhythm once, not with her voice, but by lightly tapping her fingers against the side of the chair. A sound almost inaudible. Carolina pretended not to notice. She respected the gesture. She did not correct it, did not encourage it. She simply stayed close. Fernando saw it from a distance, and felt something break inside him. Something he had hardened to survive. The house began to change its tone. No longer cold, not exactly warm, but less heavy. The silence was no longer absolute. There were intervals filled with sound, with rhythm, with something that required no physical effort, only presence. Fernando began to understand that not all care is technical. He began to fear what that meant. That if something so simple could affect Anna like that, what else had he ignored? What else lay outside his calculations? Those questions arose without answers, and the discomfort grew. Fernando felt he needed to understand better. Not just observe, but truly look, and that impulse would soon lead him to do something he had been avoiding for a long time. The decision was not planned. It happened in the space between two thoughts. Fernando was alone in the office, low light, the house silent. The day had been far too long, his mind too tired to keep its defenses up. He opened his phone almost without realizing it. There was no concrete urgency. There was no alert. There was only a restlessness that was hard to ignore, and restlessness asks for answers. The app opened quickly. Too quickly. Fernando felt his heart race. It was like crossing a door he had avoided for weeks. The cameras were there, lined up, waiting, each one offering a slice of the house. Fernando hesitated for a few seconds, that he thought about closing it, that he thought about sleeping. But something kept him there, as if that night demanded courage. He started with the hallways. Ordinary images, soft lights, no one passing. Everything seemed normal. Then the main room, empty, silent. Nothing out of the ordinary. Fernando breathed with relief. Maybe he had exaggerated all along. Maybe fear had been creating ghosts. When he opened the camera in Anna's bedroom, the relief stopped. There was nothing wrong. But there was something unexpected. The image showed Carolina sitting on the floor. Not on the bed, not leaning over Anna. Sitting on the rug against the wall, her hands resting on her knees, her body relaxed. She was doing nothing, she was simply there, and that confused Fernando. Anna was awake, she was not calling out, she was not moving, her gaze was directed at Carolina. There was silence. No scheduled activity. No intervention. Fernando leaned closer to the screen. He tried to understand what was happening. There was no neglect. There was also no procedure. It was something he did not know how to classify, and that made him tense. Minutes passed without change. Fernando expected something to begin. A word, a touch, an action. But nothing happened. Carolina remained there, present. Anna breathed calmly. The scene seemed suspended in time. Fernando felt discomfort growing, because it escaped every protocol he knew. He thought about turning it off, but he couldn't. There was something hypnotic about that stillness. Fernando realized he did not feel fear. He felt curiosity. An almost childlike curiosity. What exactly was that woman doing? Why did it seem so important to Anna? Why had no one ever done something like that before? The questions arose without answers, and the silence on the screen seemed to answer more than words. Fernando became aware of something unsettling. He had always watched Anna being cared for, but he had rarely watched Anna being accompanied. There was a difference. A difference he had never considered. There, on that screen, he saw something new. Not control, not technique, but companionship. And that realization hit him hard, because none of it had been planned. None of it had been calculated. When Carolina finally stood up, the moment broke. She left the room carefully. Anna continued looking at the empty space for a few seconds. Then she closed her eyes. Fernando felt a tightness in his chest. Not anger, not suspicion, but late recognition. Something important had happened there, and he was only seeing it now. Fernando closed the app with a trembling hand. He knew that from that night on, nothing would ever be the same. Fernando returned to that recording more times than he cared to admit. Not on the same day nor in the same week. But the image would not leave his mind. Carolina sitting on the floor with no apparent function. No schedule, no medical instruction, just there. The scene seemed too simple to matter. But the more he thought about it, the more he felt something was hidden there. Something he had never learned to see. Something that did not fit into spreadsheets. The following night, the same scene repeated itself. Fernando turned on the cameras with less hesitation. His heart still beat fast, but there was genuine curiosity. And there was Carolina again. In the same place. In the same calm posture, without speaking, without touching. As if there were a silent agreement between her and Anna. Fernando frowned. Nothing about it seemed invasive, and that deeply confused him. Anna seemed different in those moments. She was not tense, she was not waiting for anything, she simply existed there. She breathed calmly, her eyes followed Carolina's small movements. Sometimes she blinked slowly, sometimes she closed her eyes for a few seconds. Fernando noticed something unsettling. His daughter seemed safe. And this time, safety did not come from control. Carolina never looked directly at the camera. She never did anything that felt rehearsed. It was as if she did not even remember someone could be watching. Her posture was not that of someone working. It was that of someone sharing space. Fernando had never seen that happen there before. Professionals always arrived with a clear intention. To execute, correct, adjust. Carolina arrived with no visible objective. And that seemed to produce more effect than any technique. Fernando felt a discomfort growing. If that worked, why had no one tried it before? Why had he himself never sat there? Why had he always thought he needed to do something to be present? The question hit him with unexpected force. He realized he had always been too busy trying to fix things. He had never tried simply being there. He had never imagined that presence could be enough. That realization hurt more than any financial mistake. Because it touched the place he had always avoided looking at. In one of the recordings, Anna moved her hand slightly. It was not a functional movement. It was spontaneous. A small gesture, almost involuntary. Carolina noticed, but did not react. She did not celebrate, she did not comment, she respected the gesture as if it were sacred. Fernando felt his heart skip a beat. No one had ever treated Anna like that before, without expectation, without pressure. The scene had nothing extraordinary for someone who did not know the story, but for Fernando, it was a silent earthquake. Everything he believed about care was being questioned, without confrontation, without words, only through repetition. Night after night, Carolina sitting on the floor, Anna calmer, and the house less heavy, Fernando began to understand that something essential was happening beyond his control. He tried to find logic, that he tried to name what he was seeing. Emotional accompaniment, perhaps, affective presence. But no word seemed sufficient. What was happening there was not technique, that it was human, and the human had always escaped Fernando's metrics. That realization frightened him, because it meant admitting that money had not bought that, and never would. Fernando began to wonder how far that silence could go, whether it was just momentary comfort, or if it hid something greater that he did not know yet. But he felt he needed to keep watching, not out of distrust, but out of a need to learn. Something was being built there, something fragile and powerful at the same time, and he sensed that the next step would come unexpectedly. The sound emerged by chance, not as a planned game, not as an attempt to cheer her up. Carolina was in the kitchen, organizing the dishes. Spoons touched lightly, a short clink, almost unnoticed. Carolina repeated the movement without thinking. Another sound. Then another, a simple rhythm began to form. Nothing intentional, but alive. Anna heard it from a distance. Her body remained still, but her face reacted. Her eyes lit up suddenly. She turned her head toward the sound. Fernando, watching through the camera, felt his chest tighten. It was not structured music, it was cadence, it was repetition, it was something that required no physical effort, but demanded attention. Carolina noticed the effect. She stopped for a moment, looked at Anna, waiting for a reaction. Anna blinked slowly, as if asking for it to continue without words. Carolina resumed the rhythm, even softer. Spoon on the edge, pause, another spoon, pause. The sound filled the space without invading it. Fernando watched, unable to look away. Anna began to react in an unexpected way. The corner of her mouth moved, almost imperceptibly, the hint of a smile. Fernando felt his throat tighten. He had not seen that gesture in months. Not during therapy, not during visits, not during promises of improvement. That smile did not come from expectation, it came from simple pleasure, and that completely disarmed him. The rhythm continued for a few minutes. Unhurried, without increasing intensity. Carolina kept the tempo steady, as if she understood the importance of not overdoing it. Anna breathed more freely, her shoulders relaxed, her gaze followed the invisible movement of the sound, and then it happened that a soft laugh escaped, short, but real. Fernando brought his hand to his face. The sound of that laugh crossed the screen. It was not loud, it was not euphoric. But it was genuine, the kind of laugh that is born effortlessly, without intention, without fear. Fernando felt something break inside him, a barrier he had built to survive. He realized that moment had not been bought, nor planned, it had simply happened. Carolina stopped immediately when she heard the laugh, not out of surprise, but out of respect. She looked at Anna with gentleness. She did not comment. She did not try to repeat it, as if she knew that certain moments should not be forced. Anna was still smiling when the sound stopped. Fernando noticed that clearly. The smile remained, it did not dissolve with the silence. That meant something greater than fleeting joy. That night, Fernando could not sleep. The image replayed in his mind, the simple sound, the rare laugh, the ease with which everything happened. He wondered how many of those moments had been lost, how many opportunities for comfort had been ignored, for not being in the protocols, for not seeming important enough. Fernando felt guilt. But he also felt something new, hope. He began to understand that Anna did not just need to be cared for, she needed to feel alive. And life does not respond to commands, it responds to human stimuli. Rhythms, sounds, presence. Fernando realized that laugh was not an accident, it was a response to something that had finally reached her, and that would force him to rethink everything. But there was still something deeper to come. Something that would arrive in words, not sounds. Night fell heavily over the mansion. There were no visitors, no scheduled sessions. The house seemed suspended in time. Fernando walked slowly down the hallway. He stopped near Anna's room without going in. He heard Carolina's low voice. It was not singing. It was not an explanation. It was simple conversation, almost a whisper. He stood there, motionless, listening. Carolina spoke as someone who did not expect an immediate response. She commented on small things from the day, ordinary things with no apparent importance. The sky that had changed color, the distant noise of the street, the smell of hot tea. Nothing about limitations. Nothing about pain. Fernando noticed something strange. She spoke with Anna, not to Ana, as if she recognized a whole person there. Anna listened in silence. But it was not the silence from before. It was a comfortable silence. Safe. Fernando noticed the difference with a tightness in his chest. He had always tried to fill silence with solutions. Carolina let silence exist. and that seemed to help. Anna breathed calmly, her eyes did not wander. They were present. Fernando felt ashamed for never having tried that. When Carolina finished arranging the room, she stayed a little longer. Not out of obligation by choice, she adjusted the blanket with minimal care. Like someone asking permission before touching. Anna closed her eyes, but did not fall asleep immediately. Carolina noticed. She leaned down slightly and said something Fernando would never forget. She spoke softly but clearly. She said Anna did not need to be strong there. That in that space she could rest from the world. The sentence struck Fernando like a silent blow that he leaned against the wall, feeling his body given that he had spent months demanding strength. Strength to face things, strength to endure, strength to go on, that he had never thought that Anna was tired of being strong, that he had never offered a safe place to be weak. Fernando felt tears in his eyes that he did not try to hold them back. For the first time, he did not want to be strong. Carolina walked away without noticing Fernando's presence. She left the room with light steps. When she passed by him, she simply greeted him respectfully. She did not comment on anything. She did not ask anything. Fernando answered with a short no voice would come out if he tried that. He entered Anna's room right after. Sat beside the bed, watched his daughter sleep with rare calm, and realized that something inside him had changed forever. Fernando understood that he had confused protection with pressure. That his emotional armor had served him more than his daughter, that he believed that strength kept everything standing. But that night, he learned that care sustains more, that he felt guilt, yes. But he also felt relief. As if he had been given permission to change. Learn. Fail and still care. And that frightened him as much as it freed him. He stayed awake all night. Not from anxiety, but from reflection. That he reviewed decisions, words, silences. That he realized how many times he had ignored emotions because he did not know how to deal with them. Carolina had done nothing extraordinary. She did not promise healing. She did not create expectations. She simply recognized Anna's humanity, and that exposed everything that had been missing. Fernando knew he could not pretend nothing had happened. The next morning, Fernando woke up different. No longer vigilant. More attentive. He watched Carolina with new eyes. Not with suspicion, but with respect. That he still did not know what he would do with that discovery, but he knew he could not go back. Something inside him had been dismantled. And when armor falls, the skin is exposed. Fernando felt fear. But he also felt closer to his daughter than he ever had before. And that new path would lead him to an even more painful truth. The days that followed were not marked by major events. Sudden revelations. Dramatic changes. And yet, everything was different. The house seemed to breathe in a different way. Fernando felt it when he woke up. In the hallways, in the tone of voices, in the silences. Something had quietly reorganized itself. As if the mansion were learning to be a home again. And Anna was at the center of that change. Carolina began to share small moments. Nothing imposed. Nothing announced. A book read softly aloud. A story told without haste. Simple games, adapted to Anna's pace. No corrections, no demands. When Anna grew tired, everything stopped. When she wanted to continue, Carolina followed. Fernando watched everything with renewed attention. It was care without intrusion. Anna began to choose. Choose stories, choose schedules. Choose when she wanted silence. These choices seemed small, but for someone who had lost control of her own body, they were enormous. Fernando realized this with painful delay. He had always decided for Anna. Now he saw his daughter deciding for herself, and that made her more present, more alive, more herself. The games had no explicit therapeutic goal, and perhaps that was why they worked better. They were meant to share time, not to fix flaws. Anna laughed when she made mistakes. She made mistakes without fear. Carolina did not celebrate victories, nor point out defeats. She treated every attempt naturally. Fernando saw there something he had never offered, freedom without expectation, and that moved him deeply. Reading became a ritual, not daily, but frequent. Carolina read slowly, respecting reactions. She changed her tone when she sensed attention. She stopped when she saw fatigue. Anna commented on characters. She asked questions. Sometimes she disagreed. Fernando listened from the doorway. He heard his daughter think out loud. Something that had not happened in a long time. Respect became visible in the details. Carolina always asked before touching, before moving, before helping. Even when Anna did not respond immediately, she waited. That waiting time made a difference. Anna felt she had control over her own space. Fernando realized how much that had been missing. How many times he himself had invaded without noticing, with good intentions, but without listening. Fernando began to participate more. Not as the manager of the house, but as a present father. He sat beside them. He listened. He learned. He made mistakes. Sometimes he stayed silent. And for the first time, silence did not bother him. because it was not empty that it was shared, that he felt part of something real. The relationship between Anna and Carolina was not dependence, that it was partnership. That reassured Fernando. Anna did not shut down when Carolina left, she carried with her what she had learned. Confidence, curiosity, the courage to feel. Fernando realized that connection did not imprison, that it strengthened. And that changed everything. The following days did not bring healing, they did not bring miracles. But they brought something perhaps more important. Concrete hope, not based on promises, but on lived experience. Fernando felt that growing, and with it came a new question, that if Anna was ready to speak about the pain she hid, would he be ready to listen? That answer would come soon. The crisis did not come with shouting, that it came with a short sentence, spoken without preparation. Anna was sitting, looking out the window. The day seemed too ordinary to carry such weight. Carolina was reading quietly, respecting the pace. Fernando watched from a distance, attentive but calm. That it was Anna who broke the moment. She said she hated the wheelchair. She did not raise her voice, but every word landed heavily. The silence that followed was different, that it was not comfortable, that it was necessary. Fernando felt his body freeze, that he wanted to respond quickly, that he wanted to correct, that he wanted to minimize it. Say the wheelchair helped. That it was temporary, that everything would be fine. But none of those words came out, because Carolina said nothing. Anna kept talking. She said she felt trapped, not just by the wheelchair, but by people's looks. By the routine. By expectations. She said no one asked how she felt. They only asked if it hurt. Or if she was tired. Fernando felt every word like an old mistake, that he was there, hearing something he had always avoided. Pain that does not show up on exams. Anna said she felt different from other children, that she hated it when people pretended everything was fine. That she hated when they said she was strong, because being strong made her tired. She wanted to be normal, she wanted to make mistakes, she wanted to complain, she wanted to run even knowing she could not. Fernando felt the ground give way beneath him, that he had never truly allowed this space, that he had never endured hearing this without trying to fix it. Anna's breathing became shallow, her hands clenched tightly, her face turned red, the tears came quickly. They were not silent, they were urgent. Fernando took a step forward, but stopped. Carolina gently raised her hand, not to stop him, but to ask for time, and Fernando respected it. Carolina approached slowly. She did not touch right away. She knelt to Anna's level, looked her in the eyes. She said it made sense to feel that way, that hating the wheelchair did not make Anna ungrateful, nor weak, nor wrong. She said the wheelchair did not define who she was, but it also did not need to be loved. Fernando felt his heart tighten, that it was the first time someone had not denied his daughter's pain. Anna cried for long minutes, without interruption, without rushed comfort. Carolina stayed there, present, breathing with her. Fernando felt the urge to apologize, but understood that was not the moment. The moment was for listening, and listening hurts when it reveals what we avoid out of fear. Fernando realized that crisis was necessary, that it was what had been held in for far too long. When the crying subsided, Anna was exhausted. But there was something different in her face, that it was not complete relief, that it was honesty. Fernando then came closer, sat beside her, held his daughter's hand, that he did not say everything would be fine, that he only said he was sorry for not asking sooner. Anna squeezed his hand back, and that simple gesture carried more forgiveness than words. Fernando realized that protecting is not avoiding pain, that it is allowing it to exist without judgment. That he felt shame, yes, but also gratitude. Gratitude that someone had opened that door with care. Anna did not need answers in that moment, she needed to be heard, and that crisis was not a setback, that it was progress, that a painful step toward truth. And the truth would change how everyone in that house related to each other from that point on. After the crisis, the room grew quiet in a new way, that it was no longer the heavy silence from before, that it was a silence that held space. Anna breathed slowly, still tired, her eyes red, her body surrendered. Fernando stayed beside her, unsure of what to say. Carolina was the one who spoke first. Not to correct, nor to cheer up, she spoke to reorganize the air. Like someone helping another feel less alone inside their own pain. Carolina said the wheelchair was a visible absence, that it reminded Anna every day of what she had lost, and that it truly hurt. She said it made no sense to pretend otherwise. Fernando felt an immediate impact, that no one had ever named it that way before. Absence. Not limitation, not challenge, absence. Something missing that leaves an empty space. Carolina did not try to fill that space, she simply acknowledged it. Anna listened attentively, without crying, without reacting right away. Carolina continued, carefully, she said absence does not disappear when ignored, that it weighs more when no one talks about it. But when it is acknowledged, it changes shape, that it stops being a silent hole, and becomes something that can be carried together. Fernando felt his chest tighten. He had never thought about carrying it together. He had always tried to erase it. Carolina explained that Anna did not need to like the wheelchair, she did not need to accept everything with gratitude, she did not need to be an example of strength for anyone, she only needed to be Anna with anger, sadness, exhaustion and sometimes joy. She said there would be days when the wheelchair would be just an object, and others when it would be an enormous weight, and that both days were valid. Fernando realized how much he had always demanded consistency. As if feeling differently were a mistake. Here Carolina offered permission to vary. Anna asked in a low voice if it would hurt forever. Fernando felt panic rise. He wanted to answer quickly. He wanted to promise. But Carolina was more honest than any promise. She said some pains change, others stay, but that no pain needs to be faced alone. She said that when the absence tightened, they could create presence. Presence of people. Of sounds. Of stories. Of choices. Fernando felt something reorganize inside him. The idea was not to replace what was lost. Carolina made that clear. Nothing replaces it, but it is possible to transform emptiness into something inhabitable. Fernando had never heard anyone speak like that. He had always tried to fill everything with solutions. Here the proposal was different. Not to fill. To coexist. Anna seemed to understand. Her face relaxed a little. As if someone had finally stopped demanding that she be okay. Fernando realized that the conversation did not offer a cure. It offered meaning. And meaning sustains more than empty hope. He felt ashamed for never having given that to his daughter. But he also felt relief, because someone had done what he did not know how to do. And that did not diminish him as a father. It invited him to learn. To be present in a different way. Fernando held Anna's hand more firmly. Not to protect her from the world, but to walk with her within it. Anna closed her eyes for a few seconds. When she opened them, she seemed lighter. Not happy, but less trapped. The pain had not gone away, but it had been recognized. Fernando understood in that moment that recognition changes everything. Carolina did not remove Anna's absence. She transformed absence into something shareable. And that created space for the next step. A step that would demand from Fernando the greatest courage of all. The courage to admit truths he had hidden for far too long. Fernando spent that night awake. Not out of fear nor anxiety, but because something inside him needed to reorganize itself. Carolina's words echoed insistently, absence. Presence. Sharing the weight. He realized he had always confused protection with containment. He thought protecting meant avoiding suffering. But he had done that at the expense of hope. And hope does not grow in armored environments. It needs space to breathe. He began to revisit his decisions through a different lens. The rigid protocols, the imposed silence, the rush to fix everything. Fernando realized he had built a fortress. But fortresses also imprisoned. He protected Anna from the world. But he also distanced her from the possibility of feeling anything beyond pain. And that struck him as a deep failure. Not technical, human. Fernando understood that hope is not an empty promise. It is not saying everything will be fine. Hope is allowing something good to happen even without guarantees. And he had never allowed that. He was afraid of creating expectations. Afraid of disappointing Anna even more. So he chose cold control, predictability, the absence of emotional risk. But now he saw the cost of that in his daughter's eyes. He realized that Carolina had not brought miraculous solutions. She had not brought a cure. She had brought possibility. The possibility of laughter. Of choice. Of feeling without guilt. Fernando realized that this was hope. Not the grand hope of medical promises, but everyday hope. The kind that makes a day worth living. And he had denied that out of fear. The pain of that realization was intense. Fernando felt guilt. Guilt for believing that strength was enough. Guilt for demanding constant resilience from a child. Guilt for hiding behind money and control. But along with the guilt came something new. Emotional responsibility, the responsibility to change, not only for Anna, but for himself as well. Because no one comes out unscathed from love that is poorly guided. Fernando understood that he needed to abandon the role of vigilante. Not only turn off cameras, but turn off the idea that everything depends on him. That he must anticipate every risk. That he must control every detail. He realized that this did not save anyone. It only isolated. And isolation does not protect. Isolation makes people sick. Fernando was afraid to change. But he was even more afraid of staying the same. He began to ask himself what Anna needed from that point on. Not as a patient, but as a daughter. As a child. As a person in formation. And the answer did not come ready-made. But it came clear enough. She needed truth, trust, honest presence. Even if that meant admitting mistakes. Even if that meant exposing vulnerabilities he had always hidden. Fernando realized that hope does not eliminate pain, but it gives it meaning, And meaning sustains more than control. That he took a deep breath in the early hours of that morning. Made a silent decision. Difficult. Irreversible. That he needed to speak. That he needed to reveal something he had kept as his last line of security. Something that could break the trust that had been built. Or transform it forever. Fernando knew that the next conversation would change everything. Fernando chose the following morning carefully. That he did not want it to be at night. That he did not want shadows or heavy silence. That he asked Carolina to talk in the living room. Ana was in her room reading calmly. Fernando sat down with his body tense. His clasped hands betrayed his nervousness. That he took a deep breath before speaking. That he said he needed to tell something important. Something he could no longer carry alone. The confession came directly, without detours. Fernando talked about the cameras, about when he installed them, about the fear he felt, about the distrust that had grown in silence. That he did not try to justify himself too much. That he did not apologize right away. That he simply owned it. Carolina listened without interrupting, her face serious, but not closed off. She did not seem surprised. The silence that followed was long. Fernando felt the weight of his mistake fall on him. That he expected indignation. That he expected judgment. But Carolina took a deep breath and said something unexpected. She said she understood the fear. She did not agree with the choice. But she understood its origin. Fernando felt his legs weaken. That he had never been understood like that before. Without approval, but without condemnation. Carolina said that trust does not grow from surveillance. That it grows from the risk of believing. She said Ana felt when she was being watched. Even without knowing how, children sense when they are not trusted. Fernando felt a knot in his throat. That he had never thought about that. He believed protection was invisible. But excessive protection leaves marks. Silent marks. Fernando called Ana to join the conversation. His heart was pounding out of rhythm. That he sat in front of his daughter. That he told her everything in simple words. That he said he was wrong to try to protect too much. That he was afraid. That he chose control instead of trust. Ana listened with surprising attention. She did not cry. She did not pull away. She simply asked if the cameras were still on. Fernando said they were not. And that they never would be again. That he said he had learned something important. That he no longer wanted to watch his daughter's life through screens. That he wanted to be there, present. Making mistakes and learning together. Ana was silent for a few seconds. Then she said something that changed everything. She said she liked it better when people stayed, and not when they only watched. Fernando felt the tears come without resistance. The decision was made right there. The cameras would be removed, not just turned off, but taken out of the house. Fernando wanted that space to become human again. Imperfect, real. Carolina did not become a heroine. She remained who she had always been, present, respectful. But now there was something new in the air. Shared trust. The mansion began to change little by little. Not in its structure, but in its atmosphere. There were more conversations. More laughter. More of Anna's choices being respected. Fernando began to listen more than decide. That he learned that love is not proven through surveillance. That it is proven through emotional courage. The courage to trust even without guarantees. The house stopped being a hospital. That it became a home again. Fernando understood that money buys security, but it does not buy presence. That it does not buy listening. That it does not buy connection. Those things demand something more difficult. Vulnerability. That he lost the fear of seeming weak in front of his daughter, because he realized that was his greatest strength. Ana did not walk again, but she returned to living more fully, and that changed everything. Their story did not end there. But that moment redefined the path. Fernando learned that protecting is not watching. That it is trusting. That it is allowing the other to be seen as a whole person. With pain, with limits, with joy. And in that house, compassion finally began to guide decisions. Not fear. Not control. Fernando knew he would never be the same again, and for the first time that did not frighten him. Fernando spent years believing that protecting meant watching, that loving meant anticipating dangers, that being a father meant never making mistakes. But in the end he discovered something no amount of money can teach, that control without listening becomes a prison, and that care without humanity hurts in silence. Ana did not walk again, but she felt again, she chose again, she existed again as a child, not as a problem to be fixed. And that only happened when someone had the courage not to fix anything, just to stay, just to listen, just to respect pain without trying to erase it. This story leaves a difficult question. How many times have you confused protection with fear? How many times have you tried to help someone, when all that person needed was to be heard? Does control really protect? Or is trusting, even with fear, the greatest act of love that exists? If this story touched you at any point, it is because it speaks to something we all carry, the desire to protect, and the fear of losing. Now tell me in the comments, do you think Fernando was right to install the cameras? Or did true protection begin when he had the courage to turn them off? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because stories like this are not just meant to be watched, they are meant to be felt, and sometimes to change the way we live.